I'm super excited for this next session. We're going to be talking about people insights and technology and how to balance the best of human and digital. So I know many of you from the polls have been super excited about this session. So no pressure on our panelists to deliver a great conversation. Amazing lineup here. We're joined by Juergen Lahr, Senior Vice President of HR Systems and Services at ZF Group. Welcome, Juergen. We're joined by John Rickan, Vice President of HR EMEA at Blue Yonder. Kanwal Safdar, Senior Director of People Analytics at Microsoft. Our good friend Nicolas Behbahani, Head of Global People Analytics and HR Data, People and Culture at TechnipFMC. And last but not least, our good friend Ralf Buechsenschuss, who's the Global Head of Organizational Design, People Analytics and Digitalization at Zurich Insurance Company. Welcome, everyone. How are you all?
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Love it. We've got people from all over the world today. So it's going to be a very interesting one. Kanwal, where are you based, by the way, Kanwal?
California.
Nice. So what time is it? We got you up too early?
8 a.m. Nope. Wide awake. I've had my cup of coffee. I'm ready to go.
I've noticed that people from California get up really early. Is that just my experience or is that the same?
I think it's people with young kids anywhere who get up really early.
We actually spoke about this earlier. If you have kids, you have to be a morning person. there's no choice. You don't get a choice to whether you're a morning person or not. You're like, I'm awake. That's it. Fair point. Juergen, it's been a while. So nice to see you again. How you been?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And really excited for this discussion right now. And I enjoyed the conference today already since 1 o'clock German time. So wow. It's been great inspirations already.
Oh, I appreciate you staying in there. At least someone's sticking in there for 6 hours like me. So me and you, we're going to make it together all the way through. Juergen, well, let's just start with you then. What are the best ways for people analytics teams and HR teams to successfully work together so they can drive enhanced value for the business?
Yeah. I think if we talk about HR and people analytics creating value together, so the key is a joint understanding of the moments that matter where this value creation happens. So this might be a board meeting, of course, with presentations of database analysis and conclusions. So this could be a moment that matter, but I think it's more a typical scenario where this value creation happens when, for example, leaders are confronted with a situation where key talent is leaving the organization. So if you look into reasons, so a combination of its critical skill, it's a key talent, and it's a relatively low compa ratio, this might provide much of the reason for a leader already, and they will figure, that this is on a more or less abstract level, the reason. But HR with people analytics coming in, this should be a perspective beyond this respective leader's individual challenge and identify the related risks across the whole organization and go beyond the point that was raised by the. So a conclusion typically could include considering more dimensions such as employee survey data, onboarding, interview results, exit interviews, development discussions, and derive actions from this data analysis and potentially also including predictive analysis. So in short, the data would be a basis for value creation through HR VPs giving leader the bigger picture. And in the concrete example of people leaving the organization, so what's the reason behind? What are the patterns in our attrition? How can we prevent it and make sure that in the future we can work on the reasons beforehand?
You made that seem way too simple there, Juergen, for everyone. But it's not that simple, is it, John?
Well, in a perfect world, it would be, right? But it's very to the point. How do you make data credible to the leaders? And this is where I think if you work together, HR and the data analytics team, in both definitions and something which kind of resonates. And to Juergen's point, you might have one trend of attrition for a period of time, and then something changes. So you see all of a sudden you have spikes in attrition, or if attrition is the focus area, of course. But then working together and kind of find the causalities, because sometimes you can flip those in the wrong way. And that's a really good discussion to have in terms of how and where do we do this. But I think that those trends, those regular touch base, and kind of keeping it relevant to the manager in terms of what do we present as a team together to them is really key in terms of getting this successful together.
Mm-hmm.
John, one of the things that you said really resonates, which is the focusing in on the relevant part of it, right? As people analytics folks, just speaking for myself, I think there's a little bit of a thing that you fall into, which is like going after the shiniest sort of like object, right? But if it's not relevant to HR, if it's not relevant to your audience, then there's a little bit of a gap right there. So I think, Chris, part of it is also just following the energy where it is, following the relevancy and sort of like going with that rather than sort of like trying to swim upstream and doing things that may not be what the business and HR need in the moment.
It seems Kanwal, like Microsoft put out a lot of research in this space. So it seems like there's a very strong tie between the business and the people analytics team. What do you think has been the main secret sauce to that success that you and the team and Dawn are having with the connected tissue of the business?
I think one of the biggest things is, again, like going where the energy is, certainly, right? If the business is sort of like going after attrition, for instance, as a topic, and we're saying, no, don't focus on attrition, go focus on like XYZ, we're going to instantly lose our audience, right? And so that piece of like really understanding the context is important. And it's an ongoing sort of like engagement, right? It's not like we swoop in and we try to like engage with the business once a year and then sort of like, parachute out. It's that constant engagement and understanding of the context that's really valuable for us and frankly has yielded dividend, like you note, but it's taken like years and years of engagement and ongoing engagement to make sure that we understand the context of the business as well.
I think it's important what was said is about connection with business. This is very important because we have in people analytics team, and all of my peers have the same. We have the data engineers, we have the data scientists in our team, and they need, based on their KPIs, etc., to connect with the business, to understand better. In some way, we have the analytics skills with people analytics and the HR skills. So we can succeed if they both of them, understand each other. So understand each other is about, have the same skills. So connection between the skills, HR skills and analytics, they need to work together. They need, to train each other, to succeed. And that's the challenge that, each people analytics team and HR needs to connect with each other. To the point of Kanwal about engagement is very important also. So I saw that all my peers said about, attrition. Well, yes, this is the hot topics about, attrition in many companies they are dealing with. But not only that, in each HR topics, there is nowadays a connection between that data and HR question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just building on it, I think when it comes to working successfully between people analytics and the rest of HR, I think the important thing is to start actually with the business to say, okay, what is the problem we actually try to solve? And then partner, let's say, with the right part of the HR organization to actually say, well, if it's about attrition, so not start with attrition, start with what is actually the problem in the business. Is it attrition? Is it retention? And then actually bring in the right people from talent management, from compensation and so on, and guide them to actually put in place the right HR interventions based on the analysis you are providing to really create that impact on the business.
Also, by doing that, you may find that actually this isn't the causation over here, because a lot of leaders have those hypotheses, but you may actually realize actually that isn't where we should be spending our time. So it's important to take that first step and understand what is what the challenge we're trying to solve, and then work back from there.
Indeed. And building on that one, same thing with engagement. It's not always of course, you need to sort the hygiene factors, but sometimes if you just address the really, really low scores, you might spend up doing more efforts to lift them to average than if you go for the average and lift them to great. So it's kind of a different discussion to be had with managers. And for that, the HR and the analytics team to start with needs to be engaged as well and coordinated before we approach the business.
Mm-hmm. Talking of and analytics and the upskilling the team, what have you seen as the best approach to do that? Because I think companies do it very well and some very, very, very badly. What approach have you taken, Juergen, in your own team in terms of upskilling both your own team as well as the wider HR team?
We came from a situation where there was lots of requests from the business to HR, but more on a kind of, I need a polo shirt, this fabric, this size, this production origin and stuff. Yeah. So lots of work on answering a specific request. Yeah. And we are working on the topic of, we explain the wardrobe. Yeah. So what is in there? Yeah. And don't discuss about the size and the origin of a polo shirt, but here is what you have. And today it might be the jumper or the t-shirt or whatsoever. Yeah. Here's how you apply. And we are at the beginning of this journey of standardizing, but it's very well appreciated. Yeah. Because if you understand the difference between talking about a polo shirt but applying your wardrobe, yeah, there's benefit in there. But still, we need a way to go to get into what Ralf explained beforehand, to go beyond the original question, yeah, and derive the interventions that we need to define as HR. That's the challenge we are confronted with at the moment.
Mm-hmm. What's been the feedback of the community in the business, though, when you've gone back to them? Is there an appetite, Juergen, from the team?
Well, that's a positive side. It's more appetite than we can eat at the moment. Yeah. So yeah. You end up with typical resource topics, and who will provide? Yeah. So will the HR business partner select what to wear from the wardrobe today, or is there alignment between the two? Yeah. These questions, and we don't have the full service yet. Yeah. So that the leader, yeah, can grab what's from the wardrobe today. And we will go for a combination of, let's say, consulting on what to wear, yeah, but also you simply go into there either blindfoldedly and take out what you need.
I love the fact that when I first started doing this many years ago, there was no one knocking on the door. And now the biggest challenge I hear from yourselves is there's too many people knocking on the door, Chris. We need to figure out how we're going to prioritize and then how we can get this information into the hands of our leaders in an effective way that they can have that self-service model. I think a big part of that is obviously connecting, going beyond HR and working cross-functionally with other parts of the business. Kanwal, I'm interested to hear from yourself. How are you working cross-functionally with other departments and stakeholders to link people analytics to business impact?
How much time do we have? Can I take all?
Take as much time as you want.
Just joking, I won't do that. No, but I love this question because it really sits at the sort of like the intersection of HR, business, context, and that really is like my happy place in particular, because a lot of our HR stuff, Chris, like it can be in service of the employee, it can be in service of programs, etc. But again, like as all of us have talked about, the business has to be paying attention to it as well, right? And some of the examples that we've had is we routinely work with like not just our key sort of like business leaders, so our senior most leaders, but also like BI teams within their organization, right? They're the ones who have expertise then in terms of like code reviews and, you know, like how many lines of code I've checked in and, you know, quota attainment, et cetera, et cetera. Then we bring in all of the people aspect to say, okay, at the cusp of this, at the intersection of this, what is the common problem that we can solve? And again, these are the sorts of things that can yield a lot of value, but then require a lot of discipline as well, and then constant engagement to actually be able to address some of those problems. And just having, I think, teams like myself then who have that opportunity to go deeper with the business and have that engagement, that's been really valuable from our perspective. But then again, recognizing that we at Microsoft have the ability to specialize more so and actually have the ability to have people who are experts then in our engineering side of the house and our sales side of the house. So that's been really valuable. And it's an engagement that continues to yield value. And even in the 2.5 years that I've been here, just seeing the function evolve in these last 2.5 years, it's just been incredible.
Practically though, how do you go about doing that? If you're going to say to our listeners right now, this is how you communicate that, because I think that's the piece where some leaders fall down. You just provide overwhelming amount of information.
Oh, no.
You know, it's just too much.
No, we are actually really careful about like what gets curated and sent up, right? It is not, and enormous amount of information. It cannot be an enormous amount of information because if you think about leaders, they've got, let's say, 5 minutes, 15 minutes tops to go ahead and consume. So what we do is we do that work upfront of actually simplifying, understanding the context. And again, it goes back to context of like, do I understand what's happening with this business enough to say those 5 minutes or 15 minutes that I spend with the leader, they will be the most effective use of that time. So if we were to sort of like peel back and say, where do the building blocks lie? It is in early engagement. It is in identifying a simple problem, right? Like, let's not go ahead and like solve for world hunger or world peace when we have sort of like more basic stuff to start with. And then build on top of that, because a lot of this goes to, do you have the credibility with the business to actually be able to engage? And I think that starts, like, just my word of advice would be start small and build from that. Bite off what you can chew rather than like just try to like consume the entire buffet that's out there.
And I'm assuming during those meetings, you're not presenting all of the data, right? You're presenting a concise, clear storytelling more so, right? Than actually putting all of it everyone.
If you look at some of the work that we put out, the slides themselves may be rather underwhelming, right? Because there's like a line graph on there, or there may be a couple of bar charts or whatnot, right? It's the story, to your point. It's all the texture behind that bar chart, behind that line graph, to say, why am I showing you this and not 500 other pieces of information?
Yeah. I know I'm emphasizing this, but I think it's important for everyone listening that because I feel like that's where so many companies have such great intentions, but they lose the leaders on that storytelling piece because they don't storytell and they just overwhelm them with information and it just kind of gets lost. So I just wanted to take a second to emphasize that part for everyone as well.
It's a really good call out, and I'll just say, just really quickly on that note, being on screen, right? Being on just remote, the body language piece is really important. So if you're like presenting and you've got like 500 slides, let's say, you've got 10 charts on a slide, being able to like look at the person, the audience, right? I'm looking at Nicolas, I'm looking at John, they're nodding along. I know that they're listening, but just, I think audience awareness is really important of like, is your message actually landing or not?
Yeah, no, I agree. On that same note then, what advice would you give to all of the HR executives that are listening right now on how to best communicate and work with their people analytics team? So the other way around, because they also need some advice on how they communicate with their people analytics team. Because Nicolas, I feel like you became a bit animated when I said that. I kind of hit a nerve, didn't I?
No, man, that's one thing that we need, based on experience I learned is about, you can build the most performing tool, most, nice, live board, dashboard, etc., but complex one. But if the HR, your HR VPs, your HR cannot use that, or they don't know how to use that, they will still use their spreadsheet. Okay, so you need, to learn to train them, to upskill them to how to use these such new tools. I can cite, I can set Power BI, for example, for Kanwal, but other tools as well. So this data visualization tool needs to be, trained to be. They need to be, as you said, data storing training, but data visualization, skills needs to be. And when you are looking at some job description for HR, you are not finding only, skills for HR only, from legal, etc. You have now, if you are looking at data storytelling, skills, data description, using data tool. It's something new that, I noticed that. So we don't expect any HR VPs to become, an HR analyst, right? HR data analyst, but to have some skills of data, it will help, people analytics team in order, to better train them in order to, to have a course for them each time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things I want to talk about is, and I'd love to hear, John, for you to jump in, is with all the advancements in technology that we're seeing whether it's AI or blockchain, kind of list goes on. How are you balancing the human side versus the digital side of the equation?
It's a really good question, and it's one of those where I've been spending a lot of time on. So I'm really pleased to be having the opportunity to speak on this element. I think it's important to, and I'm not a data scientist in that sense, but what we have seen is that there is a lot of AI coming into the world, not just the HR area, but really across every aspects of our lives, whether that is through Google or something else. But I think it's really important to have the balance with the human, often in the driving seat on the final decision. But what I really mean with this one is, if you look into the different AI aspects that does exist today, you have the black box techniques, which is kind of, to make it very concrete for a manager, he's presented with an AI search tool and that ends up with 2 CVs. Before you buy that AI tool, do you have an CHRO or a decision maker on that one? Do you know what the background criteria is? And if it is a black box, how can you then, which you can't, go back and say, okay, this is the criteria for why these 2 CVs were selected to be presented to the manager? And behind that, then how do you safeguard that? So basically the background, if you've taught something out of a database.
John, do you have a fan, by the way, blowing near your headset?
I'm actually outside, so.
Oh, you're outside.
Yeah.
I was like, I could hear the wind, and I was like, surely he's not outside, but you are outside. Okay, great. I'm jealous.
Semi-outside, yes. Sorry for that.
Carry on.
Don't have too much. So what I meant to say was, if you have, there is different types of it, and what's important is to know which one you're using. So if you're using one which really is using black box, then that could be a troublesome later on. And if that is the case, then you need to apply the regular techniques for how do you actually counter this one. That could be simple. If it's diversity, are we all of a sudden starting to hire more of a specific category, whether that is white or a specific age or something, right? But it's important to be aware of what was behind those. The other thing is, and this is maybe more a broader one, if we are now in a digital world, which I think we all realize we are, everything can be copied, text, video, audio, then how do you focus on what really, and this is why I'm thinking the balance should be with the human, because what you can't copy is the culture and the aspects of that. So the tacit knowledge of the organization. So we need to have it there, because if we go all in and just have the balance on the technology side or the AI side, then there is a risk that we will be Amazoned or copied as happened a decade ago more.
Yeah, John, fully subscribe on your statement on the black box technology. And if you go even beyond selecting from CVs, I mean, you would also find technology that would help you identify 2 proposals for candidates derived from a video. And how this is being done, let's say the deep learning behind, you will not even understand. The question is this appropriate use of technology, which every company needs to decide for themselves, so that there might be a benefit, but it needs to fit to the culture. One aspect I would like to add, in our case, our company, human side is also, what about the colleagues? It's more than 80,000 in our case on the shop floor. So if we talk about fancy instruments, digitalizations and tools and completely neglect them, this is also something that will have an impact on the culture, because then you separate between the white and the blue collar area. So therefore, this is the less fancy side, but also culturally a very important side to be considered in production-oriented companies.
When in the decision-making process should this be considered? Or is it all like, because when we talk about investing in technology or just the overall strategy, at what point are you asking these questions?
I think you need to ask it from the start, because once you have it, it's too late. We sell it as a company as well in the product line, supply chain, etc. So and we don't have the black box technology. We always want to go, even if it's 100 of thousands of different factors that gives the advice from the system. It is always possible to go back and say, these are the factors we looked at, and this is the weighting of those. So it's not a black box. You can actually see how the algorithm weighted the different factors and why, if someone wants to see it in retrospect.
Yeah. And I think really when I did this exercise of CV screening, for example, I realized that the HR, the talent analytics, talent specialists, they need, to have the final decision. So each AI project, we need to make sure that the human will take the final decision. That's very important for them, for the HR. Also, this is not the machine will, decide for us. It's human. And you're coming back to Juergen and John. Yes, this is about, the culture. We need, to transform. We need to use. We shouldn't fear about this technology, but we have to make sure that, for the moment, that the HR and the human has the final decision. And it's for service training, but also for other tools as well. When you're developing other tools in HR, I think for the moment we are not ready. The organization are not ready to push back to the full automatic way. That's my assumption.
Yeah. What do you think, Ralf?
I would fully agree. And I also think that especially, let's say, AI, in many cases, you really have to understand what is, let's say, to John's and also Juergen's point, you have to understand how it works. And then also, as Nicolas said, the decision-making should still stay, let's say, with a human being. And I think in that combination, you're really creating, let's say, the value, equipping in the end employees with new technologies to become more efficient. And I think there's where in the end the value is happening. It's not the human or, let's say, the AI. I think it's really the combination of it, really augmenting an employee to become more effective in performing the work. And even there, people analytics can, let's say, provide certain value to actually quantifying, okay, to which extent is certain work getting automated? To which extent are certain skills evolving and changing? So where do we have to actually manage the size of our workforce differently? Or where do we as HR department have actually to bring in the needed training and so on? So I think that is then also, let's say, two sides of the swords, understanding AI, but also using AI to actually support this digital transformation in the business from a people analytics and an HR side.
And also understanding, is it actually true AI? because a lot of the platforms that I'm speaking to and the providers that love calling me every day just as much as they love calling you, when you kind of really look under the hood, most of the time it isn't really AI when you really look at it. So on that point, what questions, I wasn't going to ask this question, but I'm going to throw it to you first, Ralf, because we're already talking. What questions would you recommend our audience ask partners and providers? What are the most important questions they should be asking when considering investing in these types of technology? Because it's such a challenge, because every day there's a new shiny object, a new company that tells you they're going to solve everything. What are some of the questions that all of you are asking that you would recommend our audience ask to realize, is this actually the right fit for us?
Well, I would actually start to say, if they, for example, provide certain kind of predictions or certain recommendations or things like that, to which extent actually could we, let's say, rerun, let's say, certain models actually with our data? Because having, let's say, these black boxes or certain models which got trained with data sets which are actually not relevant for us, I think, could become a challenge. And also, I think more importantly, to which extent would they actually then also use our data to enrich their models, and where's actually then our data popping up if they go to the next company to provide their solutions? So also, to which extent would we actually lose certain know-how on our side? So coming to your point, if there are certain, let's say, providers who want to know more about your skills and capabilities, do you want to really have these capabilities out there, or do you want to more keep them on your side? So also the whole topic of data privacy and so on, intellectual property and so on. So I think there are a lot of different aspects where you should be quite critical, asking how the AI works, but also how in the end your data you're inputting into these tools is getting used.
I also fully support the topic of what's going to happen to our data. How do you work with it? If you can ask the question, how does your system work? I think this is good, because then you really can understand. It might be complex, but you will understand. The more AI is really in there, like deep learning elements. And if you ask the question, how did you make it learn? You sometimes also get interesting answers. Yeah.
That's a good one. How did you make it learn? Yeah, they can't really sugarcoat the answer for that one.
And I fully agree with Ralf. And 3 points, for me is important is what, challenge the new tool will solve. Because That's the question, not to implementing just AI because you need, to innovate, but what is the challenge you need to resolve first of all for HR to simplify them? The return of investment, okay, it's very important. How add value? What is, the most important add value of this tool for your company? And third one is the cost, of course. But this 3 point is I guess it's very important. And really, I'm in favor of, in-house every time for, artificial intelligence, all this running, like, many people, analytics leader, I'm in-house, building in-house. Why? Because when you are, building, it's required, some skills, some data scientists, etc. But when you are building that, I'm coming by the point of Juergen about culture, you will build your tool based on your culture of your company, based on the need of your company, and not, as John said, a black box. That's key,
I think there's a moment as well, Nicolas and others, and I'd love your perspective on this, of stepping back and thinking about, just because we can do something with the data, right, and build a black box model or build a predictive model or whatnot, should we actually be doing that, right? And I think it goes back to, Chris, the tee-up that you had of like AI and ML and all of that sort of stuff. One of the things that we routinely ask ourselves at Microsoft is, are we using the data the most responsible way? And if we have these models, etc., what's the impact that we may not be thinking about? And again, I think that's a great question to ask also these vendors of like, yes, you're solving a problem for me, but what's the stuff that you're not telling me? What's behind the scenes, behind, like, underneath the hood that we're not accounting for in this conversation? I think the common theme across people analytics is asking lots and lots of questions, whether that's with your HR business partners, whether that's with vendors, whether that's with the business. Because the more you ask those questions, the more the onions sort of like layers continue to get peeled back, and you really get at the heart of what you're solving for.
Yeah.
And it's also a business risk, right? I mean, we have the data protection rules. So you could do fantastic thing if you didn't have those in place, but then would it be worth it now? We have them in place for a reason, right? So if you're implementing and let's be honest, a number of people are afraid as well with what could this mean if we don't own the data? Where does the data take? Where does it go? Where is it stored? So when you apply these type of techniques, it needs to come with an added value, not just for the business, but also for the one you apply it for. You already said it before in terms of responsible use of the data, but I think it's a really key point in terms of don't do it unless you really have a good point and you consider the drawbacks of being caught by misusing the data or using the data maybe by mistake, but wrongly, right?
I can't tell you the amount of leaders that I speak to off camera who tell me the nightmare stories of investing in particular platforms and solutions and just spending years to realize this isn't actually solving the challenge that we were facing. And now they're like, I'm stuck with it. Now I just have to do the best that I can with this tool. I'm talking every day. And I'm sure everyone, you're all nodding, and I'm sure everyone listening can feel the same way. So it's super important that we take the time to ask these questions, peel back the layers of the onion, as Kanwal said, and make sure you make the decision from the right place. So that wasn't even part of our questions, but I'm glad that we added that one in, because I feel this is very important for everyone listening. What about one of the questions we have, and I would love to jump into it. What are the key sort of challenges or hurdles that we need to overcome for people analytics to really reach its true potential?
I think we still struggle. So I've been in this space since 2007, self-declared people analytics dinosaur, right? Not very flattering, but I say it to mean basically that I've spent a long, long time in this space. And I think an ongoing struggle is disparate data systems, right? You've got some of the data sitting in Workday, you've got some in a recruiting system, et cetera. How do you build a data lake? How does it all come together? I think that's going to be an ongoing struggle. And the more complex the space becomes, right? Because we have now listening systems, right? We've got Glint and Qualtrics and others. We've got ambient listening, we've got Yammer and Blind as a data source, et cetera, et cetera. how do you actually continue to pull it all together? Because there's so much value in telling a consolidated story. And I think that that challenge isn't going to go away, right? Again, to your point, there may be vendors out there who sort of like promise the world, right? And again, like have had enough experience to know that the promise isn't as close to reality as it needs to be in terms of like providing that connected tissue that we need running throughout the system.
Yeah, and just building on it, I think as long as, let's say, the different data sets stay quite isolated in the different systems, and especially if you think about, let's say, metadata, or let's say quite, for example, how you use certain tools or how you collaborate, it becomes quite difficult. In many cases, many companies set up a huge project, deliver then on the project, and then provide some insights. I think if we really want to get to the huge potential, we really have to get to a point where we can really provide analytics and, let's say, tailored insights at scale. So for example, if you think about your HR system, I think you are all in the same situation that you log in and it's actually the same view for everybody. If you log into Netflix, Amazon, or whatever, there's no same view for anybody. So how can we use, let's say, all the data we have, and how can we understand our employees the same way we understand our customers, and provide, for example, in a simple case like our HR system, a kind of experience. And I don't say, well, different colors and nice icons. I really say understanding you as an employee and say, Ralf is logging in, Ralf is in this position, his career path could be actually this, based on the skill set, based on the collaboration network he's having, and so on and so on. So how can we actually bring all the data together and provide analytics really at scale, and not, let's say, deliver one project after the other? So I think if we get to that point, we are, I think, using and really,
We're already doing this, as you mentioned, some great examples. We're already doing this for our customers in sales. We're already doing this in marketing. We're already doing this in supply chain. To Blue Yonder's point, what is it that's stopping us? For us that are less technical, that don't understand the challenges, what is it that's stopping us from doing that? Because we're already doing it, as we just said, with our customers already. So why can't we do that with our people? What are the barriers?
I think you need to have, I think it's back to the credibility to explain why is this relevant, how can it help them, and what's the work going on in behind this. If a simple thing like an engagement score survey, if the discussion with the business, and we're very fortunate as we are in AI, so they do understand it, but they all then come on scrutiny, on a higher scrutiny level. But is this really relevant? Can it really impact the, like if you have a higher engagement score, how does that fit into the results or the profits of the organization? And I think you can prove that with AI, but it needs to be credible. And if, as long as it's that, I think that's one of the reasons why it just all of a sudden blow up, and then you can do AI for everything, because there is a lot of scrutiny out there as well with the business understanding, trying to understand how is this actually helping me.
And potentially the limitations of imagination, so that actually HR can get actually to a point like that, because we don't know other views on, for example, our HR system. So I think it's also, let's say, this change in mindset to actually say, how can we use the technologies which are actually already today in place to create this kind of experience? Because in many cases, when we talk about employee experience, it's about a happiness score here, some nice icons in the HR system or whatever. But actually, if you say, how is customer experience looking like, which is very different from employee experience. And the technology is, I think, already there, but I think it's still HR itself, which is holding itself back. So I think it's really this mindset shift we need to really say, let's use the technology which is there. To Kanwal's point, how can we actually connect the data which is today isolated and create this kind of experience? And I suppose nobody will challenge, let's say, the value if you log in and you have a similar experience like going to your favorite online shopping portal or video streaming service, that the experience is better. And if you get the information you need as an individual and not as an employee, whatever, that the buy-in is there. So I think it's starting with a mindset, and then, bringing all hands on deck, building the capabilities, and just getting on the journey.
Yeah, it's almost, we had a session earlier around employee experience, And it's, you're right, the technology is already there. In the past, people would say, oh, we don't have the technology. That's there now. That's no longer a barrier, right? And I feel like people understand the value. Well, our audience certainly does understands the value. So it's like, what is that missing piece to make it, we don't have to, no one has to justify why we're doing that for our customers, because of retention, for the revenue piece. Oh, no one has to justify that, but it still feels like HR is still having to justify why this is valuable as well. So interesting food for thought for everyone. I feel like we need part 2 just on that one topic for everyone, because we're there, right? We're already there. We have all of the pieces already in place. It feels like more of a cultural challenge and shifting a mindset challenge than anything else along the way.
I think there's a change management aspect of that, right? As a human being, as a person, I don't know, like Netflix showing me what I should be watching. That's one thing. My HR system showing me what I should be paying attention to. I don't know. Maybe as an employee, I might have a little bit of a different reaction to it. So again, it goes back to like, do we have the technology? Certainly, but are the human beings at the center of it ready to embrace the change that is going to create a more curated experience? Yeah,
you are right, because something that came up earlier, it also means the ownership is now on your people. So you said you want to take charge of your career. Here it is. Here's the opportunities, so there's also, you're right, I think that's a very good point you just made, because there's one thing doing it, but are employees ready for that, to take charge and ownership of that? That's a whole nother conversation as well. Is that something that frustrates you as people analytics leaders and as HR leaders, that that it's right there and the capabilities, we have it in our hands? Is that something which frustrates you?
I would not say frustrate. Still, I think we need to accept that everybody in the company will understand that a supply chain you need to manage globally. Yeah, so it's common sense. There will be no discussion about that. For a user experience, employee experience that Kanwal just described, the more decentralized the company, the more funds you need, the more investment, the more effort, and you need to sell that. Yeah, you need to fight for this money, like fighting for, let's say, investment with externals. It is like that. It comes easier to other functions, but hey, come on. At the moment, I didn't want to be in supply chain, to be honest. Yeah, so I wouldn't call it frustration. It's our specific challenge.
Yeah,
we love it in supply chain.
Yeah, you got to shout out supply chain, John.
We love it here. But really, it's great. It's all the focus of COVID and Suez Canal being blocked by chips, and we've been in the headline for the last 3 years.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm sure we could all agree. We've come a long way, from when I started doing this 15 years ago to see where we are now. We've made significant progress as well. So as much as I said that point, looking from where we are to where we were to where we are now, it's been amazing. But I think we've all witnessed, I've witnessed each of these functions go through this. I remember seeing supply chain go through this digital transformation, sales, marketing, and now it's HR's turn. And we're already on that journey as well. So it's a really exciting time to be in the profession. And I'm sure that's what keeps all of you busy and engaged in the work that you do. It's why we wake up and do everything, and the impact that that's going to have on the lives of millions of employees all over the world that our companies represent. That being said, I think it's kind of time before I get told off by the team. Thank you so much for joining us and to share your journeys and experience. I wish you all the best.